Hello again, and welcome to part two of Julius Caesar. So, what did you think? You think that Caesar's going to run for consul or take his triumph and be happy? Well, we are going to find out. He chooses running for consul. Caesar's not happy. He thinks the Senate is not treating him fairly in any way, but decides that no, if he knows anything, he knows that the way to make a change is to get involved in politics and make that change. So he shrugs it off. He'll get a triumph later. He'll figure that out. But right now, he's going to run for consul. He's going to choose politics because he knows and truly believes in the people of Rome, and he knows that he can do well by them. So he is going to help out the people of Rome and run for consul. He runs for consul. Well, we're not there yet, but before he runs for consul, though, he needs to have some great background in his political experience. So he continues. He comes back to Rome from the military, runs for and holds many different political offices, and since his governorship in Hispania was so successful, he uses that to help get himself elected, and he does. He ends up beating out a different person who had way more experience than he did, and he holds one of the two consul positions as the most senior public office in the Republic. He aligns himself with two other powerful men, Crassus and Pompey, to make sort of an informal alliance. And that informal alliance is called the First Triumvirate. Caesar, actually, to help out with that, to kind of bribe and make good on their terms, ends up offering up his own daughter, Julia, as a wife of Pompey to solidify their alliance. So Pompey gets married to Julius Caesar's daughter. All right, they've got a great connection. They're now family, and they are going to work together to help build Rome. Cool. So the first triumvirate was between an alliance between Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey. Lasted for about 8 years, 60 BC to 53 BC, and it combines the abilities of the three most powerful men in Rome at the time. Caesar, who had an enormous popularity with the people and a great legal reputation. He was a very intelligent man. He knew the law inside and out, so he had a great beginning connection with the military and knew the people well, and wow, was he very intelligent when it came to law. Then there was Crassus, great amount of wealth, which means he could buy plenty of votes. Oh, I mean, buy things for the people. He was basically buying votes, though, too, for when he ran for consul. He would happily, use his own money to pay for gladiatorial fights or Circus Maximus events and say, oh, come to this event and make sure to thank Crassus when you are voting next, because he's the one paying for all these fun events for you. And he had a great influence within the equestrian order in the military. And then there was Pompey, who was probably the richest Roman at the time and a very impressive military reputation. So Crassus and Pompey, both older gentlemen than Caesar at the time. Now, Julius Caesar grew in his military might. His consulship didn't last super long, as consulships didn't, just a couple of years, and then someone else was elected. But he stepped down from consulship, and he was really, really, really poor at that point, which is weird, but he used a lot of his own money to support programs for the people. So, what's he going to do? Well, one big, great way to make money in Rome at the time was to go into the military and lead military campaigns. So he took a governorship in the territory of Gaul, which is northern Italy, part of France, Germany, and the Balkans. There was a lot of money to be made in military adventuring, so Caesar took advantage of it. Gaul was a very unstable territory at the time. It bordered a lot of other unconquered territories and nations, and Gaul was it was a whole large territory filled with a bunch of different tribes who all had their own rules, who all had their own governing systems, who all made different decisions. They were all Gaul, but they all had similar, kind of like the Vikings. They had a similar way of life, but each tribe made its own rules. So they weren't a united people. Caesar used this to his advantage. He proved to be a great military strategist, and he defeated tribal revolts all over Gaul because the Gaul didn't like the Romans showing up in their place. And who would when he shows up and goes, "Hi, we're Rome. We're going to take over now." Yeah, I don't think the Gaul were like, "Yeah, I don't think so." So they didn't get along. So the Gaul would revolt back, but Julius Caesar was quite an impressive military strategist. He knew what he needed to do to win battles. So during this time, he brought a lot of stability to Gaul. Caesar was given 5 years to conduct the war with the Gauls. Now, there's a few reasons for this. Normally, if you went off, you were a high-ranking official in the Roman government, like a consul or a senator. You would be given a year because, well, you'd need to be back in Rome to be doing your job. But Crassus and Pompey were happy to take the job of consul, and Caesar, whew, my apologies for yawning. So Caesar, no, Caesar can go do his thing. They were happy to be rid of him for 5 years because then they could rule Rome the way that they wanted to rule Rome. It was totally cool. It was like, while the cat's away, the mice will play. Well, Caesar's the cat. He's away, and Crassus and Pompey are going to do what they want to do. Caesar, on the other hand, took those 5 years and was exceptional. He fought hard, had a crazy amount of victories, and after the 5 years were up, the Roman people were so impressed with the amount of land that was coming back, the territory they were taking up, that he was granted another 5 years to finish the job. Again, part of it was, wow, you're doing a great job. And the other part of it was, good, keep him out there so we can run Rome the way we want to back here, which wasn't necessarily good for the people of Rome, but it was very good for the pocketbooks of Crassus and Pompey. Now, when the Romans arrived in Britain, there were still Gaul tribes in Britain, Great Britain, England, that area. And the Gauls knew the Romans were coming, and they were standing on the shores. They had tribes upon tribes who were standing upon the shores ready to attack the Romans. They were trying to intimidate the Roman soldiers, and it was working. The Romans, it said that the Romans were too afraid to get off the ships. And a Roman standard bearer, the one who basically walks with the flag that says this is what company of Roman soldiers we are. Standard bearers were much younger than soldiers because they typically didn't fight either. So some 12-year-old kid, standard bearer, jumps off the boat and gets in the water and starts yelling, "Veni Vidi Vici for Rome!" And the rest of the Roman soldiers were so inspired by his courage, they followed him off the ship and, won the battle against the Gauls on the island or on the shoreline. Some important names that we need to know in these battles. One is Vercingetorix, who is the chieftain of the Averni tribe. A member of the Gauls, looks a lot like a Viking, and he actually united all the Gaul tribes against the Romans. He said, look, we are fighting individually, and individually we're not going to succeed. But if we band together and all come together with our thousands of members, we have a chance of taking Rome down and keeping our territory. Because remember, guys, Rome wasn't just taking over land that was just empty and blank. Romans were conquering land that already belonged to someone else. That's the truth. So Vercingetorix pulled together the Gaul army, and actually in the Battle of Gergovia, he ends up, they're successful. They beat the Romans. They actually push off Julius Caesar's troops, killing or injuring over 7,000 Romans and saving their territory for another day. Julius Caesar's troops, give up and retreat after that battle. But it's only one battle. So we'll see what happens next. Now, a really important name that we need to bring in here as well is this is about the time where Mark Antony joins in on our story. He is Caesar's cavalry commander, so he's in charge of all the horses. And he eventually becomes a general in charge of 3 legions. He is incredibly intelligent strategist. He's a great fighter, very brave, and right now, a good friend to Julius Caesar. So it all comes down to the city of Alesia. Although the Gergovia battle was won by the Gaul, it wasn't enough to scare off Julius Caesar completely. And Julius Caesar followed Vercingetorix back to the town of Alesia. And Alesia is on this little mountain here. See this little town right up here? Fantastic. Well, you might notice there's a whole bunch of other things around this town. Yeah, so Julius Caesar shows up, and at this point, he's been battling for almost 10 years. He is a brilliant strategist, and when I say brilliant, people still study him, study his battle techniques to this day. He looked at the town of Alesia, realizing they're way up on a hill, and he thought, we start climbing this hill, this is not going to end well. But we have a better idea. He decides to wait them out. So what do? They build a wall. Not just 2 walls, or not just 1 wall, 2 walls. An inner circumvallation and an outer circumvallation. So you have the inner, which is this wall right in here. It goes all the way around. And that is to prevent anyone from getting in or out of the town. So no one can come into the town, which means if they need supplies, if they need soldiers, if they need medicine, if they need anything, they need water, they're not getting out of the town. Then they set up the outer circumvallation, which is over here. This prevents any ships from coming in to rescue their town. It also prevents any armies from coming in and being relief forces to help them out. So, after a few months, he builds 2 giant walls around a town to basically wait it out instead of actually going off and killing more people and having any of his guys, die marching up a hill. No, we'll just build a wall around the town and wait it out. And at some point, they're going to surrender because they're going to be without food and without water and without medicine. They'll have no choice. A few months into the building, and Vercingetorix knew that he had no other choice but to surrender. He wanted to keep his people safe and not lose any more lives. So it is said that he rode in on a white horse into Caesar's camp and the Roman camp and got off of his horse, threw down his armor, and knelt before Caesar in a, I give up, I surrender, we're done. And he remained there until Caesar's guards took him away to be taken back as a prisoner of war for the Romans. And Caesar won the battle. So Caesar had now been fighting the Gauls for almost 10 years. The Senate and Pompey were starting to get a little nervous that he had too much power because at this point, the Roman legions would follow him anywhere. They had so much respect for Caesar, so so much respect that that whole process of building the circumvallations was to keep his guys from just needlessly dying. Of course, the army respects him. They are going to follow him and follow any orders he comes up with. And when he has 150,000 men behind him, that's a lot of support. Also, the people were all in support of this great, amazing military hero who was conquering lands for Rome, helping make Rome safer, and building the territory and making Rome richer. Of course, they loved him. So the Senate and Pompey were a little nervous. Now, why don't I mention Crassus? Well, Crassus dies. So while Caesar's away, Crassus dies, leading an invasion into Persia. Now Pompey becomes the sole consul back in Rome. That's like having the powers of a dictator. Julia, Caesar's daughter, who was married to Pompey, ends up dying during childbirth, which is a pretty awful situation. So what does Pompey do? Well, he marries Cornelia. Cornelia was Crassus's wife. So, Crassus is dead, so she can obviously get married to Pompey now. She also happens to be the daughter of Scipio. Not the Scipio from the Punic Wars, but the Scipio right now who is a political rival of Caesar's, who was named after the fantastic general from the Punic Wars. Pompey then aligns himself with Scipio. The first triumvirate is over. Caesar is no longer welcomed as part of the ruling class. Pompey and Scipio are going to rule Rome together with the help of the Senate. Many people believed that Caesar was becoming too powerful. Scipio and Pompey were happily telling the Senate, this is a little concerning. Caesar has all this power. The people do whatever he says. We should put a stop to it. So the Senate orders Caesar to disband the army and return to Rome. He says, the Senate says, you know what, Caesar, thank you for doing everything you've done. Thank you for winning the war against the Gauls. Why don't you send the army back home? And why don't you come back too? We don't need an army out there anymore. We're good. It's good. We're done. And Caesar is a little skeptical of this. He's like, ugh. The Senate is telling me to leave all my guards and to leave the entire army and send them all home, and then me come back alone by myself into Rome. And he now knows that Crassus died, and he knows his daughter died, and he knows that Pompey is now married to his enemy's daughter. Yeah, this is not something high on his priority list right now. This is not something he wants to do. So he tells them no. He says he's got some things to finish up with the army. No thanks. Well, this refusal led Pompey to accuse Caesar of insubordination. If you're not going to listen, we are higher than the military. Caesar, you must listen to us. And he didn't. So the Senate declared Caesar a traitor and an enemy of Rome. So now he was a traitor. That is a cause punishable by death. He is a traitor and enemy of Rome. He went from being Rome's hero to a traitor. Caesar returns from Gaul with his army and tries to negotiate again with Pompey and the Senate. He says, look, I just spent 10 years in this war. I just gained a lot of territory for Rome. I saved a lot of people's lives. I'm bringing back all these riches and lots of food and lots of new resources for Rome. look, just meet with me. We don't even have to meet in Rome. We don't have to meet at the Senate. Let's meet anywhere. I'm like, let's meet and talk. Let's talk about this because I love Rome. I'm not an enemy of Rome. I am only doing this to better Rome. You know, Veni Vidi Vici, Rome forever. And they tell him no. They will not grant him an audience, and they demand that he resigns. You must resign your post, hand off your general title to someone else, and come back into Italy. You're done. So Julius Caesar marches the army to the Rubicon River, which marks the northern border of the city of Rome. And there they wait. If he crosses it with the army at his back, it would be an act of treason. It would be an act of you are bringing military might into Rome to attack. It would be an act of treason. It's said that Julius Caesar took an hour to think it over, resting his army at the north shore of the Rubicon River before he made his decision. What decision do you think he made? You'll have to find out next week. Not next week. You'll have to find out tomorrow what he does. Yep, I'm making you wait.